Tonight, on A Week in League, we'll be talking about the world's representatives from the major regions. G2 Carlos steps down, New World's Anthem, Champions Queue is back, and so much more right after the intro. Welcome to A Week in League, where we cover League of Legends esports all around the globe from all 4 major regions. I'm your host Slomar, and let's just get right into the news. As usual, timestamps and references will be in the description. And while you're down there, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button. Thanks. Before we get too deep into the show, I want to address why I've been gone for the last 2 weeks. I've been shooting on my phone since the start of the show, and unfortunately, I just broke my phone. I also had plans to eventually stop shooting on my phone and buy a camera, so I did, and then I bought another one. Anyways, after some struggles and hiccups, we're back, baby, and it's better than ever. Just want to take a second to thank my friends who helped me with my studio setup. Brandon, Crystal, James, thanks guys. And thank you for watching this video. Since we're heading into Worlds, things are gonna be a little bit differently. This week, we'll keep things familiar and we'll talk about the world's representatives from the 4 major regions. Next week, we'll take a look at the play-ins teams and make predictions on who'll make it out. We'll continue to cover other news in our segment In Other News, so stick around for that. Now that we got that out of the way, roll it! The LPL gets 4 slots at Worlds, 3 in the group stage and 1 in play-ins. The LPL representatives are JDG, TES, EDG, and RNG. Let's talk about each team for a little bit here, starting off with JDG, the LPL champions. They got first All-Pro top laner, 369, Korean jungler Kanavi, Yagao, Hope, and Missing. JDG beat TES in the LPL playoffs twice. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Once in the upper bracket finals, and then the second time in the finals. Proving that even though they might have been in second place during the regular season, they got TES's number. We'll have to see what JDG can do on the world stage, but they look very scary. And speaking of TES's lineup this year is rookie top laner Wayward, LPL Summer 2020 MVP TN, legendary mid laner Knight, Jackie Love, and Mark in the bot lane. TES looks scary all year long, maintaining first place in the regular season. Yeah, they might have lost to JDG twice in the last 2 best of 5s, but they did 3-0 EDG. Could this mean that TES is maybe just not as good against JDG specifically? We'll have to see how TES stack up on the world stage this year. EDG, the LPL 3rd seed with their veteran roster, Flandre, JJ, Scout, Viper, and Mako. EDG finished the regular season in 5th place, and they definitely turned it on for playoffs, winning multiple best of 5s and stopping the LNG miracle run to Worlds. We'll have to see if this team can be a real contender, but I think they'll definitely make it out of groups. And last but not least, we got the MSI champions RNG. The RNG lineup this year is Breathe, Wei, Jiaohu, Gala, and Ming. RNG swapped out their top laner Bin after winning MSI in spring. And that's a ballsy move if you ask me. RNG looked shaky early in the split, however, they've managed to gather some wins and finish the split in 4th place. Nothing much to say about the playoffs or the regional finals run, but that's not to say that RNG can't do some real damage this tournament. RNG will start in the play-in stage, but I'm very confident they'll make it out to groups. And that's it for all the LPL coverage this year. We might do some LPL segments in the off-season discussing some roster moves or roster rumors, but other than that, there's no more LPL games until Spring Split next year. Don't forget to tune in then. The LCK also gets 4 slots at Worlds, 3 in the group stage and 1 in play-ins. The LCK representatives are Gen.G, T1, Dom1 Kia, and DRX. Let's talk about the LCK champions Gen.G. This year's lineup is Doran, Peanut, Chovy, LCK MVP Ruler, and Lehens. Honestly, Gen.G looks like they're a cut above the competition from the rest of the LCK teams, and they look like a real tournament favorites. We'll have to see how deep of a run they can make, but I'm confident we'll see them at least in the semifinals. The second seed from the LCK is T1, and this year's lineup is Zeus, Owner, Faker, Gumayusi, and Keria. They may not look as good as Gen G, but T1 has many titles both domestically and internationally. You can never really count T1 out, you know? The third seed from the LCK is Dom1 Kia, and this year's lineup is Naguri, Canyon, Showmaker, Duckdom, and Kellen. Things have been a little shaky with Dom1 Kia swapping out Naguri for their sub-top laner, Bertle. Bertle is serviceable, but he's no Naguri. We'll have to see if the team can pull together and get some wins at Worlds this year. DRX is the last representative from the LCK, and they will be competing in the play-ins. This year's DRX lineup is Kagan, Pioshik, Deft, and Beryl. Now, this was supposed to be Deft's last dance, however, the player has since announced that he won't be retiring at the end of this year. I've been saying it all year, but I'm excited to see what Deft can do on the world stage. And that's all 4 LCK representatives, and probably the last time we'll be talking about the LCK this year. We may cover some LCK roster news during the offseason, but there will be no more games until Spring Split next year. The LEC also gets 4 slots at Worlds, however, 2 are in play-ins and 2 are in the group stage. The LEC representatives are Rogue, G2, Fnatic, and Mad Lions. Let's start off by talking about Rogue. Boy, they finally did it. They won an LEC championship. Even they can't believe it. The lineup this year was Odoamne, Marlang, Larson, Comp, and Trimby. Rogue finished the regular season in 3rd place, and they had an impressive playoffs run, finally 3-0ing G2 in the finals. I think it's very possible for Rogue to get out of groups this year, but we'll have to wait and see. The LEC second seed is G2, and this year's lineup is Broken Blade, Yankos, Caps, Flakked, and Targamos. G2 finished the regular split in 1st place and dominated the playoffs up until they lost to Rogue in the finals. G2 has made it far at Worlds before, and they have an MSI title under their belt. You can't really count them out. Excited to see what this team can do on a world stage. The 3rd and 4th seed from the LEC will play in the play-in stage. The 3rd seed from the LEC is Fnatic, and this year's lineup is Wunder, Razork, Humanoid, Upset, and Hylissang. Fnatic finished the regular season in 5th place and made a deep playoffs run to get the 3rd seed from Europe. Honestly, it's pretty impressive what this team has been able to do in the last few weeks. We'll have to see how they stack up against the competition. Mad Lions is the last representative from the LEC, and this year's lineup is Armut, Elyoya, LEC Summer 2022 MVP Niski, Unforgiven, and Kaiser. The team finished the regular season in 2nd place, but they had a rough playoffs performance. It's so hard to tell how good this team is right now, so we'll have to wait and see. And that's all 4 LEC representatives, and probably the last time we'll be talking about the LEC this year. We may cover some LEC roster news during the offseason, but there will be no more games until Spring Split next year. The LCS is the only region out of the 4 major regions to get 3 representatives rather than 4. Now you try saying that 5 times real fast. This year, the 3 representatives are the LCS champions Cloud9, 100 Thieves, and EG. Let's start off by talking about Cloud9, and this year's lineup is Fudge, Blabber, Jensen, Berserker, and Sven. There's a lot of talent on this roster, and 2 fresh role swaps. However, that didn't stop them from dominating the playoffs and winning Cloud9 another title. C9 might be in a tough group, but I have some hopium maybe they can make it out. The 2nd seed from the LCS is 100 Thieves, and this year's lineup is Someday, Closer, Abadage, FBI, and Huhi. This 100 Thieves lineup has been together for quite a while now, and hopefully that'll give him the edge to perform on a world stage. I'm not as hopeful about this one, but it is what it is. Last but not least, we got EG. This year's lineup is legendary top laner Impact, EU and NA MVP Inspired, rookie mid laner Jojopian, rookie AD carry Danny, and Vulcan. Perhaps even rookie AD carry Cowrie. Danny has subbed himself out for the last weekend in playoffs, so we'll have to see if he'll be back for Worlds. Without knowing who's competing and what form Danny is really in, it's hard to tell how EG is going to perform this year at Worlds. I'm not sure if EG will make it out of play-ins this year, but maybe they can pull off a crazy run. You never know. And that's all 3 LCS representatives, and probably the last time we'll be talking about the LCS this year. We may cover some LCS roster news during the offseason, but there will be no more games until Spring Split next year. Make sure you tune in then. Welcome to In Other News, where we discuss news that may or may not be relevant to the scene. Since we've been gone for a couple weeks, I'll try to touch on news that happened in the last 3 weeks while we were gone. Say what? Breaking news. This just in. G2 Esports CEO Carlos steps down amid Andrew Tate controversy. Carlos was spotted partying with Andrew Tate at a club. After his controversial appearance with Andrew Tate, Carlos was initially hit with 8 weeks of unpaid leave. Since then, both Carlos and G2 have put out statements addressing the departure of Carlos. It's important to note that G2 was started by Carlos 8 years ago from money he earned as a pro player in the league scene. A lot of us remember the famous Xpeke play. Well, Ocelot was playing against Fnatic at the time on SK. Sad to see someone who's been around for so long leave, even though I don't support their actions. We'll have to see if Carlos will make a comeback in the esports scene anytime soon. With that out of the way, let's get back to our regular programming. This week's headline is Lil Nas X, Lil Nas Executive, is the new president of League of Legends. You know what this means. This year's Worlds song will be by Lil Nas X. The song is scheduled for release on September 23rd and is probably out by the time you watch this video. Lil Nas X will also be releasing a skin in collaboration with Riot, most likely for the new champion, Cassante. The skin will be available to purchase using the Worlds 2022 event tokens. Everything leading up to Worlds with the song and the videos always gets me hyped up for the World stage. Make sure you're tuned in to the upcoming episodes where we'll cover the rest of Worlds for the year. In other news, we touched on this earlier when we talked about EG, but this was arguably the biggest news dropping right before finals weekend. EG's AD carry, Danny, has subbed himself out for mental health reasons, and AD carry player Cowrie will be taking his place during finals weekend. Pro players in professional sports, or even esports, are in very high stress environments. So, as a fan of the sport, I have expectations that these players can perform on stage and take this pressure. But since we don't have any information, I'm not going to touch on the mental health reasons. I just want to talk about the point that Thorin brought up. Some of you may not be familiar with this, but the LCS rules allow you to take 2 substitute players into playoffs, and you have to lock these players in 2 weeks before heading into playoffs. EG had a substitute jungler and one of their coaches listed as their sub player. When Danny stepped down, one of these substitutes should have been the only option EG had. However, it seems like the LCS allowed EG to bring in a substitute, therefore breaking the LCS rules in some way. This doesn't look good at all, and there's more details that I glanced over here and there, but if you want to learn more about this, I would recommend you watch Thorin's video on the subject. Link in description. In other news, Riot reintroduces Champions Queue ahead of Worlds 2022. This happened a couple weeks back, so there has been tons of content on people tracking the pros, especially since Riot's allowing co-streaming of Champions Queue games. If you want to watch the best in the world play against some NA talent, go watch some Champions Queue. T1 drops head coach Polt after fans continue to pressure the organization. We've covered a few headlines about the T1 fanbase and the pressure they've been applying on the players, organization, and staff members. I think this is getting a little crazy in my opinion, and the T1 fans are on a whole other level. In other news, Schalke 04 suspend league player for toxicity hours before the start of their EU Masters run. This whole situation's a little strange, and the player has since released a statement on Twitter. This whole thing happened a while back, so I won't get into too much details, but if you want to learn more, links are always in description. PENTA 1860 have been disqualified from Germany's Prime League with immediate effect. A statement from the league confirms the reason is due to financial rules. Again, this also happened hours before the start of the team's EU Masters run. If you want to learn more, links in description. Oceanic esports giant Order is one step away from liquidation as they had failed to find a buyer for the organization. Staff has had their contracts terminated as their teams make their final showing at DreamHack Melbourne this year. It's crazy how this massive organization collapsed so quickly, especially after raising $2 million less than 12 months away? If you want to learn more, check the article in description. In other news, and maybe better news for G2, G2 signed all women's League of Legends roster, G2 Hell. This comes after the success of a couple other G2 women's teams. G2 have acquired one of the front-running female League of Legends rosters in Europe. G2 is definitely a massive player in esports with teams in almost every game at this point. If you want to learn more, link in description. In other news, TL parts ways with their AD carry player, Hansama. This comes after the team fails to qualify for Worlds this year. Steve mentioned in an interview that the Liquid LCS roster for 2023 will be different. There are rumors going around that Hansama will be playing for K-Corp in the LFL. We'll keep tracking the players in the off-season, but I doubt any big signings will happen before at least Worlds ends this year. And that's the end of our show for this week. I still can't believe how close we are to 100 subscribers. Thank you all so much for the support. If you're enjoying the show, please consider subscribing. Have a good night and good luck in solo queue. Woo! Yeah. Do 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 do.